What should anglers be looking for when deciding on a new rod?
If you're just getting started and you're trying to figure out what rod to get, you could ask people at the fly fishing shops for a recommendation that'll suit your needs. Depending on if you're small stream fishing, big lakes, or large rivers, you may find a different rod size would be better to start with. Also a good source of information is if you'd be interested in finding out about your local fly fishing club. The club members often can give you the best advice on what size rod to get started on. Let's talk about rod action. First of all, what is rod action? Rod action is comprised of two main elements. One, where does the rod flex? And then secondly, how stiff is the rod compared to the rated line? Most casters do very well with a moderate to moderate fast taper. That means the rod action flexes in the top 1/3 to 1/2 of the rod, and that below the midpoint of the rod it becomes much more firmer and more powerful. This happens to be a trout fishing rod, 9'5" weight, with what we described as a medium fast taper, but we rate it as medium in stiffness, so that on a common distance cast of 30 to 40 feet, the rod bends properly. If we were seeking to cast much farther each and every cast, it would be desirable to have maybe a bit stiffer rod action, such as ones that we design into saltwater casting rods. This is a saltwater designed rod. It has what we call a fast taper and stiff rating to the action. The fast taper means the flex point of the rod is concentrated more heavily towards the tip, and it engages more power sooner in the blank, and such that when you cast aggressively in windy conditions and when you want to really cast a long distance cast, the rod has much more power into the middle and bottom sections of the rod. It also may take a little longer distance to make the rod feel like you're bending the cast correctly. So these are the two primary components of rod action. Where does it flex and how much does it flex?
Any other major purchase or even a beginning purchase, you don't go just buy a car by just reading it and say, I'm going to go buy that car. The first thing you do is you research it, you go drive the thing, and you check the dealers out. There's no difference in a fly rod. If you're going to be on that river, if you're going to take that trip to Montana, a trip of a lifetime, you just don't want to blindly buy a rod that when you get out there you don't have the lines to match it, you don't have the right leaders, you don't have the right flies, you've never cast it, you'll have a kind of a crummy experience. It is, I think the key thing is to have a relationship with your local dealer. Those guys and the guys behind the counter are awesome. They're there to help you, they're there to line you up with what you need, and to give you a good experience on the water. The internet is okay if you know exactly what you want. But you've got to have hands-on, you've got to touch it and feel it.
Since fly fishing is done around the world, really, for all types of different species, I'd be very reluctant to say there is one certain rod, line, and reel for everybody. I'd say you want to be pretty honest about where it is you're going to be fishing, what you're going to fish for, and I'd go to a shop or you could get, or a club, and get some really good information on what would match that sport. I'd try to pick that out, what you'd be doing 80 or 90% of the time with a rod, and that'd be the first one you'd want to learn with. But it's really critical you balance the rod with the line, get a nice reel for it, but the line weight, of course, has to pull these flies around easily and has to load the rod down. So balanced equipment is the key.